Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm super excited today. We're actually going to put together our 125 motor. I've been pumped for this time. I don't have all the parts to get it completely back together, like my head, the jug, things like that. So we're going to try to get the crankshaft in and the cases back together. So yeah, let's hop to it. We're going to start with this side first, being that there's more to do on it. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit our crank bearings. We're going to do the sweat method, which this sweat method is pretty much the most common method out there as far as installing bearings goes. And what that means is we're going to heat up the outside of where our outside race would land in our housing. We're going to heat this up to about 300 degrees, and that will expand the case, the circumference of this, and allow you to drop a frozen bearing out of the freezer into it. It works 99% of the time. Sometimes there's a couple hang-ups, but usually if there's a hang-up, it's because this inside, the inside of this housing is not smooth. There's a jagged edge or something in the way, and that's what's causing the issue. Or the bearing has something on the outside of it. So let's hop on it. Now I like to just use some needle nose pliers, just open them up on the bearing, and then that will allow you to just set it in. Get it lined up here, just like so. There is our first crank bearing installed, and the bearing is non-directional, so it doesn't have a forward or a backward facing side. Now we're going to move on to our primary shaft bearing. Now this one, as you can see, goes all the way through the case. I'll show you a trick to make it so that the bearing, you don't have to worry about centering the bearing up. You can just set it in until it stops, and that is to install your shifter retaining plate, or whatever they call that. But anyway, we'll install that on the back side real quick, and then we'll be able to put that bearing in and it will stop. Okay, so I found my shifter plate here. I'm going to call it a retaining plate. I don't know what the correct verbiage is, but it's going to go on just like that, and then we'll be able to come in from the back side and hit the drop the bearing in without having any clearance issues, without, you know, not getting it in far enough or going too far. Okay, we're going to flip the case over, and I'll show you guys what I mean now by that. Is, see, now we have a lip right there, which makes it so that the bearing will stop when we install it. Back to heating it up. Alright, we got our case hot. I'm going to drop this next bearing in. Alright, well, it didn't go in the first time quite perfectly. So we're just going to finish driving it in, and it's going in real easy. And there it is. Okay, that one's seated now. I thought it would fall in, but not quite. So that one's installed. No harm done to the bearing, as you can see. Now, obviously, the correct way to do this would be to use a press, but most of us don't have a shop press, and so I'm obviously trying to show you guys the way I've done it all the time without having that nice equipment. So alright, so let's give this a shot here. Let's see. Yep, okay, that one went right in, so no problem there. I think I let this one, I held this bearing for quite a while. I think I held it for too long and it just got too warm. But okay, next one would be our shift drum bearing, which will be it's a funny looking bearing. I'll show it to you guys. Let me go get it out of the freezer. Okay, here is our shift drum bearing. Again, non-directional. See if it just fits right in, like I really hope it does. And it wants to really, really bad. Ah, no, not quite. Go ahead and just drive it in. Okay, that's it. Okay, that one is done. We have one left now. That is just our shift shaft bearing, and that one I have a different method for installing. Unless it decides to tap in very easy, it'll be a different method, but I'll show you that depending on how it goes. Okay, we got our shift shaft bearing. Let's see if it wants to go in very easily with the, this one will never slide in, it's too small of a bearing, but we'll see if it drives in fairly easy, which it does. Okay, that's it. That one is in. So that's all the bearings on this case half on the inside. We'll get two more bearings to do on this side. That would be this one and this one right here. So these ones are smaller bearings. This is your water pump bearing, and this is the bearing for your, oh geez, your exhaust valve shaft. Oh, I'm super bummed. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. These just popped in. I heated up the case to about 220 degrees. These are in the freezer. I just literally pushed them in with my fingers. So I'm super bummed because I wanted to film the whole thing. But anyway, yeah, that one just pushed in by hand. Now this one sticks out a little bit and it looks odd, but that's how it's supposed to be. So this is my water pump bearing. The other thing too that I want to mention, these other bearings that I've drove in with the seal driver, with this tool right here, it's not hurting the bearings one bit to go ahead and drive these in, as long as you're hitting it on the outer race of the bearing. If you hit it on the inner race of the bearing, that's when you start screwing stuff up. And obviously you don't want to be very violent and very crazy with it because you can crack the case. Right side case half is done. Super pumped. Let's do the left side, which is the easy one. This is our roller bearing. The other one was a ball bearing. So this one's a little bit different. This one actually has a sleeve in it. So the sleeve comes right out. So remove the sleeve because that'll go on the crank. And then you'll set the bearing in that direction. So hopefully it just falls right in for me, just like the other ones have. And you want to be really careful with this one. You don't want to damage this one. You don't want to damage any of them, but especially this one. So boom, look at that. Perfect. Okay, so that is the last of our crank bearings. Those two went in. Awesome. The crank bearings usually do go in fairly easy. So now I want to say something real quick while I'm thinking about it. I could just take this case, throw it in the oven, and heat the whole thing up to 300 degrees. I'm really just taking my time with this engine and just doing it one bearing at a time. But we're going to go ahead and put these other two bearings in real quick, heat this up, and honestly, the whole point of showing you guys this with the torch method and everything like that is it's a very, very effective way of removing or installing certain bearings. If say you're not replacing all the bearings in the case, say you're just doing a bottom end rebuild, but the transmission, everything else is good, and you know for a fact that you're not going to replace those bearings, and you're just doing a crankshaft. That's cool. You're just going to heat this area up, drop the crankshaft bearings out, and then put your new bearings in. So being that I'm doing a full case rebuild, I could just throw this in the oven and be done with it. But I'm enjoying this method right now, so that's the method I'm going to go about doing it. I'm gonna put this bearing in right here, and I'm wondering if I can just put these blocks under and just tap it in like so. Flip this around so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. That's a really, really solid, stable setup right there. And while this case is really hot, we'll just see if we can just tap this thing in. Give it a whirl and see how easy it wants to go in. Okay, that's in. That is all of the bearings on the motor. Okay guys, we are well on our way to assembling the bottom end of this motor, but before we can go ahead and continue, we need to prep the case halves to receive the crank and the transmission. And according to the KTM manual, you want to insert all of your oil seals first. Now, a couple things here. If you guys can see here, these two oil seals look almost identical, but they are very different and they go in different places. Now here's the funny thing, they both would fit perfectly in this counter shaft spot right here. So you need to be very careful as to which seal you use where. Now I'm going to show you how to figure that out, and that is to get on, you know, a website, Rocky Mountain, whatever, and go to the schematics and find where the seal is and click on the part number. If my gloves will do it. Come on, baby. There we go. And usually it tells you right here, and in this case it says 32 by 45 by 7 is the seal size. So I know that's my shaft seal ring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the size of these seals. Now 45 would probably be your outside diameter, I would assume. So we'll check that, and sure enough, we're at 45.14. So that would be, there we go, 45.04. So that would be our outside diameter. Let's check the other one. Should be the same, and it pretty much is. Let's go ahead and check this here. Okay, so this would be the thickness of our actual seal itself. We're at 6.76, so that's not 7 like it said in the schematics. So let's check this one here. 6.4. Okay, so this one has got to be it. This one's got to be 7, and actually it is pretty close. Sorry, my measurement was just a bit off. I was gonna second guess myself there. So 6.89. So that would be our 7mm seal. So that is how you will double check to make sure that you're putting the right seal in the right spot. So we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna insert our seal for our counter shaft. And this is a stopper ring that you do not want to forget. It's a seal stopper ring. It goes right in there like that. Now before we go ahead and do this, we're going to get a little bit of assembly lube. Just put a little bit here on the edge and then a little bit in the bearing, and then we'll put our seal stopper in and we will drive this baby in. And very, very simple process. Alright, so what I'm using here is just the Maxima assembly lube, and I'm just going to put it in the bearing just like that. And then I'm going to take a little bit on my finger, and by the way, this stuff smells like peppermint. It's freaking awesome. So and I'm just going to lube the outside of the seal here, and that's just going to help it slide in really, and help with the process there. So get our stopper ring, put it in, set our seal on top, and then we'll just press it in. And we are going to take our socket that is the same size, nearly the same size as our seal. This one's pretty dang close, and we're just going to tap it in little bits at a time. You want to make sure you're going in straight, unlike what I'm doing now. Okay, there we go. So I want to be flush with my case, so just a little bit further in, and they are done. Okay, that side looks good. One more tap on this side. Okay, and there we go. Counter shaft seal is done. Now, as you can see, the seal is just a little bit bigger than the actual counter shaft bearing and the seal stopper. So don't worry about that. That's not an issue, because this sleeve actually inserts in, and that is ultimately what seals against your seal. There's an O-ring that goes in there before that though, so we won't forget that. But okay, moving on to our main crank bearing here. that's going to be this little guy. And I'm not going to go ahead and lube anything up in there, but I am just going to lube the outside of this. I will lube that that bearing with some 2-stroke oil rather than with the assembly lube. You could use the assembly lube, but it would smoke like a son of a gun. So got my handy dandy seal driver here, and the way this seal driver works is it sits over the seal, and I didn't have the right size on this one, or else I could have done it there, but being that it's just a little bit bigger than the seal, it will stop once it gets flush with the case. So super handy tool to have. You can use a socket still for this, but you kind of have to be careful as to, you know, you don't want to set it too deep. So boom, money. Okay, so that seal is in. Now we're going to move on to our left side case half. Again, I'm going to lube this bearing from the other side before I put the crank in with 2-stroke oil, but I will put just a little bit of lube here on the outside of the seal, and I'm going to do that to every single one of my seals, and that just helps it slide in. Alright guys, before I go any further here, I just wanted to let you guys know that all the tools, lubricants, the specialty tools, things like that I'm using on these engine builds and teardowns, I have linked in the description below. So if you're wondering what I'm using, just go ahead, check out that, click on the links, and that will take you to exactly what I'm using or something very similar. So go check it out. Thanks. Like I said before. Okay, so we got that. We'll line that bad boy up right there. And hopefully I can do a better job of driving this one straight in. I am going to get a different adapter for my seal driver though, and make it right. Okay, I've got my correct size of seal driver. I'm going to drive this baby home. Cool, and that's it. That thing is flush. Alright, the next thing we want to do before we put our transmission and our crank in is, if you can see right here, there's just a little screw hole there, and right there is where this screw, it's just a little hold down screw for that bearing, and we don't want to forget that. So I'm just going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. And by the way, I do not use red Loctite on anything, so that's a personal choice of mine that I have chosen to make. I have taken things apart with red Loctite on it, and needless to say, it is worse than a nightmare. So you will never ever see me taking anything apart with red Loctite. Now right there is pretty dang snug. We're going to call that good because it sits up against the bearing itself and then right up against the side of the case. So there is a gap there. There was a gap before, but that's it. Now that we got our blue Loctite in there and we're snug, we know that bearing isn't going to go anywhere. Alright, and our last oil seal on this side of the case is going to be our shift shaft seal. Say that 10 times fast. Shift shaft seal. And it should just press in. These are the easy ones. And all your seals, I should have talked about this before I did this, but all of your seals have to be oriented a certain way. The spring will always be on the inside if there's a spring on the seal, and if you do it enough, you'll understand how the oil seal works, and it becomes very apparent. Now, also, if you put it in upside down, you're going to know too, because it's going to be cupped the wrong way. I don't want to confuse you guys, but you understand what I'm saying. So that's done. Okay, I'm going to double check a couple things, and I think we're ready to put the transmission in. Okay guys, I got our crank here. This will be our flywheel side. This will be our primary gear side, and that would go into the right side case cover. And you can see the sucker is frozen, and there, it just popped right in. So you don't need to heat the bearing up to get it to seat. You just need to have the crank cold. And as you can see now, with it in, It rotates perfectly fine. Now, something that you need to understand is you need to have this con rod in the opening when you insert it. If it's this way or any other way, it's not going to clear the case because it will hit the case just like that right there. So you can see the amount of condensation buildup that's on the crank. We don't like that. That's water. So I'm just going to let it warm up and I'll wipe it off. But in the meantime, we're going to assemble our transmission. Okay guys, one more thing before we go too far here. This sleeve actually needs to go on to the crankshaft. So I'm going to heat this thing up because it doesn't want to just slide on. I'm going to heat it up and then I'm going to, it should be able to drop on after that. Now once I heat it up, obviously I don't want to handle it by hand. I'll use some channel locks or something like that, and just be very, very careful not to mar up this surface right here, and then put it on. Alright, hopefully this thing just slides right on like it's nothing. And there we go. Okay, cool. That is done. Alright, so now let's work on assembling our transmission. We want to do it from this side. I'm just going to go ahead, put my assembly lube on this. Now, this side of the case obviously will not have will not have two-stroke oil in it. It will have gear oil in it. So we can put this assembly oil in it, and on the first oil change it will clear out nicely, and then you'll be nice and lubed up for avoiding a dry start. So okay, we've got our transmission. This is probably going to be the most tedious part of this whole part right here, or this whole process right here, is just getting these to insert in the correct spot. This would be your primary shaft or your main shaft. This will be your counter shaft, as it has the spot for the sprocket. So what you want to do is you want to mate the gears. Oh, sorry, I'm actually backwards. This will make more sense now. Okay, that is mated right there. You can tell these two cogs right here, or gears, line up, and then this one lines up here. Now on this side there is a washer, so you want to watch out for that, and then on the opposing shaft there is a washer on the opposing side. So we've got those mated up now, and try to hold them together, try to keep your washers intact, and we're just going to go ahead and just set it right down in its home. And if you do it correctly, there we go. We're going to put our shift drum in first, which it only goes in one direction, and that is this way, like so. You can see how it just spins on that bearing. I lubed the crap out of this stuff. So next thing we're going to do is put our two shift forks in over here. Okay, here is our shaft. It inserts with the tapered or cut side down. That way it goes through. So that's pretty easy to remember there. And then you cannot install this first. You actually have to put your shift forks in first. Now this side has two shift forks. You cannot get them mixed up because it will not assemble correctly if you do. So you can see here how they both have pins in them. These pins will not go through like the pin on the other shaft or the other fork, but that is the orientation of these shift forks. So first one is going to drop down into the bottom here and line up in between those gears right there. Now when you do yours, you'll get a feel for it, and then what you'll have to do is you'll just have to lift up slightly on it, and just straight up and down, and lock it into the shift drum. So now this shift fork is tied into the shift drum here, and I don't know if you can really see it, but anyway, it slips right into that slot. So nothing crazy there. Okay, so that one is installed. Next one will go in that slot right there underneath the I guess it would be the second gear, and then it sits right there in the drum. Then you're going to drop your pin in, and you can see once they're together, everything just kind of flows smoothly, and voila, you're in. So now we've got a good mate between the two, and everything is aligned correctly. We'll go ahead and do this one now. And like I said, this one, the pin can push through the back side. So just grab yourself a little screwdriver, push it through, and try not to bump it too hard when you put it in. Now this one fits right in between these two gears here and lines up with the middle, I guess, valley of this shift drum. So just kind of work it in there just like so, and then you can drop your shaft in. This shaft is not directional like the other one is. It just is tapered on both ends, and there you go. You are completely installed. Now we can go ahead and put our pins, our dowel alignment pins in, one there and one there, and we will grease up our case half, and both case halves if that matter, and go ahead and slap the two together. Alright, now I've done this on every single engine rebuild that I've ever done, but I just take a little bit of grease and I just literally coat the case just right where the gasket is going to meet. What that does is it does a couple things. It allows you that if you have an incident and you need to remove it, the gasket comes off easy, and KTM actually calls for a little bit of grease on the case half before you put the gasket on, and it also holds the gasket in place when you get ready to put the two case halves together. So huge benefit there. Now once you put this thing together and get it all screwed down, it's not gonna leak, not with a gasket in there. Yamaha uses a I don't know if their new bikes use gaskets, but their older ones used a Yama Bond. It was like a gray sealer, and basically a gasket maker but better, and probably some of the best gasket maker ever made. And you had to be really careful how you applied it and how much squeeze out you had and all that stuff. So but anyway, you can see this grease I'm putting on here is so light, it's not even funny. Like, it's just a little bit. So get yourself a little brush. This is just a flux brush for soldering, and I have used it for grease for a long time. Just a very, very, very light coat all the way around. But one thing you do not want to forget is your divider, your little rubber, and that is this guy right here. It goes on the other case half. Now I'll just show you right here real quick. It goes in right here in this area. So yeah, just like that. And then when you push the case halves together, it will slide it all the way in. I've got my grease on there. Before I put that in, I'm going to put my spacers, or my dowel pins, back in, and these buggers have been a pain in the butt to get out and to put in. So hopefully they're not just horribly bad, but they have been horrible. So okay, there we go. Didn't damage nothing. Okay, those are in. Now we can take our gasket and just put it right over the top here. Hope I'm still recording. Yes, I am. And line everything up. Okay, so there we go. This gasket fits nice. Sometimes you just get unlucky and get a bad gasket that just fits horribly. All right, don't cut this gasket because that's what keeps it together up here. You can cut it afterwards and it is perfectly fine. So, okay, we got everything there. Now we can take this side, and before we actually install it, we're just going to lube up these bearings because we haven't touched them yet. Now we're all lubed up. Got our little rubber oil separator in there, or whatever you want to call it. Be my guest. And we are ready to put it together. Let's flip it over. And this part, take your sweet time to get everything lined up. This is kind of the most crucial, intimidating part of the whole build is this moment right here. And if you did it correctly, everything should line up really, really well. And it did. All right, let me show you guys something. Over here, I have kept all of my bolts for the engine case, and so I know which ones they are, but I've got something way, way cool to show you guys. And that is this bolt kit. I am super pumped about it. This has been sitting on the shelf now for like, oh, I don't know, a couple months, and I'm pumped to put this thing back together with these new bolts and make everything just look so clean and so good. So I kept, like I said, I kept all the bolts over there so I can figure out, you know, which ones it is. And it looks like it's this middle column right here that's going to be all of the outside or the case bolts, the inner case bolts. So let's bust these babies open, put them in, and then we'll clean this case up and we'll be done with the assembly of the crankshaft and the transmission on the bottom end. All right, I got my bolts laid out here, shortest to longest, and my shorter ones are gonna go in here. Okay, let me show you guys this. Now, this is basically with any motorcycle manufacturer. See how the bolts are the same distance above the actual case all the way around? That means that you've got the bolts in the correct holes. So if I were to actually swap this one probably and this one, you see how short that is and then how tall that is. That's incorrect. So you want to make sure you get them in the correct holes so that they're all the same and you can't go wrong. So we're gonna snug this down with a T-handle and then we will torque it. All right, now I don't know torque specs on this bike, but I'm gonna go ahead and go with 84 inch-pounds because that's what I've done on bikes for years and I've never had a problem with it on the aluminum cases. So that ends up being about, oh, what is it? I think like 7.5 inch-pounds or foot-pounds. So anyway, 84 inch-pounds is what I'm gonna go with, and I'm basically just gonna work my way around from the middle out. So I don't think you can go wrong doing it that way. And honestly, if you don't have a torque wrench, you should get one. That or learn what very snug is on an aluminum case and just roll with it, because you don't want to screw this up and strip the case bolts out. That would be a bad deal. So. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of that engine assembly video. Stay tuned for part 2. It's coming out here in the next couple of days after you see this video. So we've made progress on the engine, as you can see, past what we got done filming for part 1. So real quick, I wanted to explain to you guys something. I'll put the clips up here in the video. If you guys notice, some of you may have caught this. After I installed the bearings on the, let's see, it would be the right side case cover, or right side case, sorry. If you notice in the clips, the bearings actually changed. I actually second guessed myself and took a bearing out and put it back in the other side and flipped 2 bearings. So long story short, I thought I read my bearing numbers wrong, and in fact I actually read them correctly the first time. So after I got the case together and everything put together, I actually had to go completely apart again with it and swap my bearings out. So just be very, very diligent about looking up your part numbers and as to which bearing goes where, because the case actually went together just fine, but the transmission binded up a little bit, so it wouldn't flow freely. But stay tuned for the next video. We're going to continue. This thing's looking really factory. I'll give you a sneak peek of it now. It is looking so sweet. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.